Good evening, everyone, again. We continue our educational part of Linoleum Festival. Right now, we proceed with the project UK-UA Animation Lab, within which we have a series of lectures by UK and not only UK professionals on animation production, distribution, and promotion. And today, I'm happy to present our guest, Simone Giampaolo, who will talk on animation production pipeline for 2D and 3D projects. Can we please bring him on the screen? Thank you. Also, Aaron Wood, our partner on the project from Squiggly Animation Magazine. He will moderate this session. And in the end, we will have a couple of minutes for questions and answers. In case you have some, just please raise your hand. Також ця сесія.
This session is also in English. If you need interpretation, please come up to the back and take the headsets.
I think we can start.
Thank you, Anastasia. Are we good to go?
Yep.
Great. I won't delve too much into who Simone is, because I know he's going to do that for himself, but I'm just going to give a brief introduction for the room. So I've known Simone for 10, 15 years or so now. He's a London-based Swiss animation director who has written and directed many awards-winning shorts, including the Oscar shortlisted and BAFTA-nominated Only a Child. Over the years, he's worked on a multitude of commissioned projects for clients such as Netflix, Google, Cartoon Network, Disney, Lego, Nickelodeon, Marvel, Pokémon and BBC, and he's collaborated with many studios including Jellyfish Pictures, Access Studios, Blue Zoo, Aardman and Ritzy Animation. At this point, I'm going to hand over to Simone because he has a lot to get through, so thank you, Simone, and over to you.
Hi, thank you, Aaron. Hello, everyone. I will I will share my screen so we can go through the presentation that I put together. How is it going there? All good? So I'm gonna share this and the presentation. Right, can you see my screen now? Yes.
Yes, we can. Sorry, I was running to the microphone. Yes, everything is perfect.
Fantastic. Give me just 1 second and then we can start.
Yes, and when you need your show reel on, just ask for this, please.
Perfect. Just like to... I can... interview. Okay, perfect. Ready to start. So welcome to my presentation. Really happy to be here. Thanks, Aaron and Anastasia, for inviting me to this event. Today we'll talk about animation production pipelines for both 3D and 2D projects, but mostly focusing on 3D because that's what I've been doing for the past 13 years. Just a little intro about myself before we start. My name is Simone Giampaolo. As they've said, I'm based in London. I've been working as a commercial and series director for the past 10 years, and I'm currently directing a new TV show called Stunning Run at Jellyfish Pictures. You can see some of these below are the brands and clients I've been working with over the years. My journey into animation started very, very early on. I've been drawing and sketching and illustrating stories since I can remember. This is a picture of baby me while I was trying to learn how to use brushes and colors. But when I got to 18 years old, it became quite clear that I was not great at using computers. I was quite crap at computers, to be honest. And so I found out that, that was a big gap in my knowledge. And that was not the only gap. I was also pretty bad at English. So these two things were two things I had to improve, I had to work on. So I decided to move to a little town in the south coast of the UK called Bournemouth, where I studied at Bournemouth Animation, computer animation for 3 years. So forcing myself to learn English, improve my skills, and also learning computer skills that could have been necessary to get a job later on. At that point, I was pretty bad. I couldn't even use Microsoft Paint properly, let alone Photoshop. So just a couple of joyful pictures from that period in Bournemouth. As you can see, I had lots of fun. And if we flash forward now 10, 11 years, you can see just a sample of my work, a little showreel of the latest project I've been involved in. So please, you can send the showreel now. Okay, that's just a little taste of what I've been up to. As you can see, there are lots of bouncy, quirky CG characters in my work. So that's what I've been specializing in over the years. I do love old techniques. I will talk more about that later. I do love stop motion, 2D, but in terms of work, the majority of my projects have been involving CGI. So I will focus and give tips mostly regarding CGI, but I believe they can be applied to other pipelines too. Okay, we can go back to my presentation. It's great. I've just finished directing a TV show for Netflix, which was very, very challenging and a very interesting experience for me. The first time working for Netflix. It's called Bad Dinosaurs. It came out a few months ago. You can find it on Netflix. It's about a family of dysfunctional T-Rexes who are not very good at tyrannosauring in the Mesozoic era. So it's all fun, it's all quirky, slapstick humor, and it's fully CGI. And at the moment, if we look at the future and what's coming, at the moment I'm working as a series director on Starring Run, a new original project by Jellyfish Pictures. Slowly, I'm also working on the script and the development for a new feature film by Timeless Films, who produced Scrooge a couple of years ago for Netflix. And because I really want to inflict myself pain and not sleep at night, I'm trying to bring forward a personal project, a personal short film, because I love mixing techniques. I love making sure that I can work on 3D project, but also something more traditional. This particular personal project is combining pixelation, real life action body of a person, and stop motion and 2D animation. So hopefully that's going to see the light of day at some point in the future. Now let's dive into animation pipeline. That's the crux of this talk. That's the most important thing we want to focus on in this talk, and it's a beast. Animation pipeline would take days to be explained, especially if we go step by step by step by step. There are ways to represent animation pipelines which are quite simplified, like this one I drew, which can show you very clearly, in a very simplified way, the different steps of production. However, you depending on the company, depending on the technique, depending on the person you are, the producers you have, you might find other kind of pipeline online. You see stuff like this, stuff like that, to the animation, through the pipeline. There is a lot to be said. And in this talk, I will not be able to cover every step going from the idea creation to the final product, because it would take way too long. I'm not going to talk about every department in depth, but I'm going to give you a robust overview on the pipeline, what I think is a pipeline that works, and I will give you tips. I will give you some suggestion on how to maintain the pipeline firm, robust, and flexible enough to adapt to different situations. So that's a bit the aim here. I hope we haven't lost any audience while saying that. But yeah, the aim is not going through every single stage of production, because it would take much more than 1 hour to do that. But yeah, it's all about what's. Let's start with the basic question: what's an animation pipeline? It's just very simply put, is a sequence of production steps that are necessary to maximize efficiency and keep everyone involved on task, and everyone, most importantly, working on time without accumulating delays. So it's a system that allows the idea to run all the way to final products without anyone losing money, getting fired, or doing extra work during the weekend. That's the aim. That's the ideal scenario. As I said, depending on the technique, you might have different moments, different departments coming in. For example, when you have 3D animation, you have a model, texturing, skinning, where else in and then you have animation and lighting, where else what's interesting about stop motion is that modeling happens first, and then lighting and animation happen simultaneously, because you have to light the shot, the real live action shot, in order to get the final products. And that changes into the animation as well. So what's clear from looking at all these different pipelines, it's that there will always be a development phase where the idea takes place, where the idea happens, the idea gets developed and gets brought into pre-production. That pre-production is mostly about developing the idea visually with storyboards and an animatic, and doing the first designs as designs for characters and environment. That storyboard gets put into an animatic, as I said, and that animatic feeds the animation team into production. The production is the biggest chunk of the animation pipeline, is the one which involves most people and is the most expensive part of the production, of course, because it's got modeling, texturing, rigging, the animation, lighting and VFX, and even rendering. That's all can be all considered part of a big production pipeline. When it comes to 2D, you would skip over modeling or texturing. You would animate the lines in 2D, and the black and white lines, the outlines, and then you would fill up the color. So it's slightly different, the approach to getting the final shot there, but it still involves the step of animation in there, of course, which is part of the production. And then we end up with post-production, which mostly involves compositing, so adding the final touches to the images, color correcting, adding some final visual effects to the image, making sure the transitions between shot to shot is nice and refined. The last touches in edit, and music and SFX, sound effects. If everything goes well, that's the steps you go through in order to deliver something to the broadcaster or to the client. I can show you this is just a very simplified way of how you could transition from animatic to the final product with this progression reel. This was just a a very simple bumper for Disney XD, so just a few seconds. But you can see already that from an original idea, very simple initial ideas, you can see the steps which bring you from animatic to layout, therefore like blocking the cameras in 3D, to the full animated environment in 3D, so main characters and secondary characters, and then stepping into lighting and rendering. However, that's a oversimplification of what's happening. It's way too simple, to sum it up like that. It's beautiful to see this stepping, from one department to the other, but the truth is that every step in the production is not in a sequential line. It's not a conveyor belt going straight from A to B. It's always gonna overlap. It's gonna, the different departments the different tasks are going to overlap always in production. There will be not a straight line. Most of the times, the tasks or assets or characters, they will go back and swirl back to previous departments. And all this is to say that the best pipelines and the best systems you can set up for your team and your artist are not the pipelines which are straight. It's not the pipeline that are going straight from A to B, are the pipeline which are flexible enough to take the hits and absorb the potential reworks that happen during production. Because there will always be retakes, there will always be things that don't work, and you have a good pipeline if you can, sort of absorb that extra work that happens throughout the months of production or post-production. So starting from this concept that I drew very neat, very clean, if in reality you might get something more like this, you might get, connections between departments and links between departments that you were not expecting, and they can really slow down the production if you are not putting that into account, or if your pipeline is not flexible enough to absorb this kind of hits or this kind of curveballs. Like, look at this, for example. This is a very bad one here. This is when, and it happens all the time, it shouldn't, but it happens. It's when you deliver the final product to a client and they are still rewriting the script, and that happens. And a good pipeline makes sure that you can absorb that kind of comment, put it into action, and just do the change, do the tweak as soon as possible, or as efficiently as possible. And it shouldn't happen though, but it does happen. I can show you just quickly another making of, which is a little more accurate, but still, quite simplified compared to. Oh, 1 second. Can I stop this? Is it possible to stop it? Let's see. I don't know how to stop this, sorry. So this is of course, while showing, while working on the animatic, lots of other things. 1 second, sorry. I will just try to find the timeline so I can play this. Fine. Sorry, I was looking for the timeline here. So this was a project I directed, a very simple project I directed for Aardman, for a very simple Google project for being aware of internet security. And in commercial is a very good example of when things happen all at once, and all the departments of production and even pre-production, they all work simultaneously, and things overlap a lot. So the story is called The Internet Legends. It's about a family which, needs to be safe in the land of the internet. And while doing while starting the script, we were already developing very simple characters, very basic designs. And while the animation and the animatic team and the storyboard team was starting putting together the animatic, we would have concept artists creating art like the one you see now on screen, which would guide the final look and final feel of the film for the lighting and compositing artists. So again, everything is sort of happening all at once. And while concept artists were developing the look of the film, we would have prop designers designing the prop. While the prop designers were designing prop, we would have modelers doing the models, and then texture artists texturing the 3D. And as soon as those models were ready, the animation team would jump in, the rigger would give controls, and the animation process would start, while the characters were still in shading process or in texturing process. So this is just to demonstrate how everything it's not a straight line. Everything is really happening all at once sometimes, and that's what brings you then from this kind of progression you see here. You can go all the way from concept art to animatic, to animation, and then to the final product, which is reminiscent of the concept art style. I will show you just a few progressions here at the end. Yeah, so that's purely to show you how busy an animation pipeline can be and how easily things can break. And the most important thing to remember is that any delay in the animation pipeline, every time you don't submit your prop or your asset, the department after yours will have to wait. So an animation pipeline makes sure that the artist after you, your colleague that needs to take your piece of model or your piece of animation will have something to work with tomorrow or in a few hours. That's important. So just to sum it up, why do we need an animation pipeline? That's the fundamental question here. First of all is save energy. Saving energy is saving time for the production team, but also for the artist. And saving time is saving money, which is the budget of the project. So that's put in a nutshell. That's the more flexible, the more efficient your pipeline is, the more you can save money. The clear pipeline will help with the clarity in assigning and receiving tasks. So everyone always knows what to do. There are no gaps. There are no dead times where people are just idling and not knowing what to do, or they wonder where to find files. It's like we want to avoid that. We want to make sure everyone knows what to do and how to do it. And that is also favored by a smooth and clear communication between departments. So a good pipeline, the way you communicate through documents or through a software, helps the communication between departments or even artists in the same department. And most importantly, it avoid waste. So it avoids character artists or animators to animate shots which are deleted or they will get cancelled. And when things get wrong, and things will get wrong at some point, things always get wrong at some point of production, like your software crash, you lose files, the way files are published between one department and the other doesn't work. So things will go wrong. When they go wrong, and when that happens, a good pipeline or a good pipeline TD will make sure that we can transition smoothly from the moment of crisis to fixing it without panicking too much. There will be a bit of waste of time, of course, there will always be, but a good pipeline makes sure that there is always like a sort of a plan B if something happens. And eventually, the most important thing and the reason why we need an animation pipeline is make sure that the deadlines are respected and hit. And all these together, all these elements or these bullet points here favor and they contribute to a healthy relationship between production and artists. When there is a good relationship between production and artists, the studio, everyone feels more at ease, it feels more comfortable, and they know what to do, they are not too much under pressure, and artists work better in general. When the pipeline is not behaving properly, and when you start having problems and delays because of the pipeline, that's how the art team versus production relationship looks like. It's not going to be a friendly one, and there will be always, delays or misunderstanding, and we don't want that. We want the pipeline, that process, to help us so the art team and production relationship can look more like this. That's the aim. That's we want that peace and love between production and the art team. That's my personal point of view, my personal perspective, but it can help any artist in the production, whether it's 2D, stop motion, or 3D. In order to really streamline the process, in order to make sure that you can actively help the team you're working with. A good director needs to understand, but not be proficient in every step of production. That means that you see all the steps that I showed you before, that a big list of different tasks that you can find in a animation production pipeline. I don't know how to do all of that. I've done some of it in the past. I've done some modeling, I've done some lighting, I've done some compositing, but not to a level that I would be comfortable to, work professionally in. It's the understanding of that process which is important. I think a director should know what every department does and what every step involves, but it's not necessary to know the craft, firsthand. But I think that applies to every artist. If you know what the next steps in the production pipeline do and what the previous steps of the production do, you can be actively helpful to find solutions and to find shortcuts to make everyone's life and everyone's work easier to handle and simplify it. So knowing all that is very helpful, whether you're a director or a member of the crew. Pipeline tips, or PIPs, as I like to call them. I just came up with that name. I don't call them PIPs, to be honest. But hey, just deal with it for now. First one is the KISS rule that I usually use in animation when giving animation feedback, but it applies to pipeline as well. Keep it simple, silly. It's really easy to overcomplicate a pipeline. It's very easy to create too many folders, create a structure which is overcomplicated and ends up slowing down the artist because they don't know exactly what to do or how to save it, what's the right folder to find things in, and that happens all the time. That still happens, So imagine you're a new artist in a studio. You are a modeler in a studio. You turn up in the morning at 9 and your day starts for the first time. A good pipeline should allow you in less than 1 hour, to pick up the system and start working within 60 minutes. You should be able to understand where your files are, where the concept art is you need to model, and where to save the files. This is the basic. This is the ABC of pipeline. And sometimes, especially big companies which have a very important structure, they tend to overcomplicate things, and they are a bit less user-friendly. So there is no need to reinvent the wheel when it comes to pipeline. There is a structure which has been used like those plans that I showed you before, that sort of system of steps that I showed you before, that's a very good base, and that's been used for years and years. So there is no reason really to reinvent everything, but I always try to remind people to keep it simple. Naming convention and folder structure. That's when people get very confused sometimes, because I would always recommend to spend enough time at the beginning of the project to set up the right folders instead of doing it later, when it's going to take way longer to readapt the naming convention and the folder structure to a project. So spend enough time at the beginning, make sure that you've got enough folders there, you've got the right naming convention, and from that moment you shouldn't be touching or changing it anymore, rather than jumping straight into a project and, you know, call the files babby bloobly boo, blah blah blah, new blah blah new _2, new final, new very final. Is like, don't do that. Even in a personal project with friends, if you're doing some personal project, don't do that. Just come up with a solid naming convention structure. Will save massive time later on. I just want to give you a little tip that I learned over the years working in studios when it comes to naming shots and naming sequences in the animatic. When you do the animatic stage and you start numbering the shots, numbering the sequences, always use multiples of 10 rather than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So instead of doing shot 1, shot 2, shot 3, you do shot 10. Shot 20, shot 30. That allows your future self to correct or to add tweaks without changing the naming convention or changing the structure of your pipeline. So if you realize, I need another shot, you can add easily shot 15. Or if I need 2 more shots, you can add easily shot 12 and shot 15. It's like it allows you to correct yourself later. So that's what a good pipeline does. It sort of forecasts, it foresees potential tweaks and mistakes in the future. Tools are your friends. There are lots of tools out there. Some of them are free, some of them are more expensive. Some of the one I've been using in the past in different companies are ShotGrid. I'm currently using that I use that for the dinosaur series for Netflix. I'm using that now for Stunning Run. ShotGrid is quite common and quite spread among the industry, but it's also quite expensive, I believe, that one. There are other ones like F-Track, Frame.io, SceneSketch, but also traditional spreadsheet work too. Why are those tools great? Those tools are great because they allow you to have a overview on the video, scribble and sketch directly on the video, add notes to determine part of the timeline. And those comments will get stored into the system. So production can access, the other artist can access, your client can even access if necessary. So everyone is on the same page. They don't get lost, those comments. But as I said, all that can be done also on simple spreadsheet if you prefer to use, Google spreadsheets or Excel or Word. That's possible. But there are some tools out there which are very handy, especially when giving feedback. So whether you are an animation supervisor, a director, a lighting TD, or if you are in any position of giving feedback to your crew, these tools are a bit of a lifesaver. Number 4, script breakdown. That's when things get interesting after development. So when you jump from development to pre-production or from development to production, you need to read through the script. The ideas usually start on the script. You have to make sure you read the script and you do a breakdown of the script as accurate as it could be at that point. So the initial breakdown should be as precise as you can. And that will make the pipeline work better in the months ahead. When I say breakdown, I mean you want to know the amount of characters. You want to know what characters you have in a specific short or in a specific episode, the assets, the number of locations, the kind of VFX you're going to handle in that particular episode, the time of day. So how many light setup do you need? Is that an episode which takes place during daytime, or is also a sunset and at night? Those are all things which add to the production count and add to the cost of a determined episode or a determined short film or commercial. So having a very clear breakdown, really helpful, but be careful though. At writing stage, the writing stage is made out different stages, sub-stages. So it's quite rare for the script writer to turn up with the final script. It's like, this is the locked one, go with it. Usually you have a premise, you have an outline, you have a first draft, maybe a second, a third, and then you have the final locked script, which gets sent to the client. It's a very good practice to keep reassessing the breakdown at every stage. It's like at the premise, outline, drafts, and so on. Like every time there is a new draft, it would be really helpful to look at the breakdown and make sure that it's still up to date. Why am I saying that? Because from draft 2 to draft 4, maybe we lose some characters or a new prop gets introduced, and so this is really helpful. So we avoid making extra work or stuff that it's actually disappeared from the script at some point, or it will save us time. It will save us the surprise when we suddenly realize, oh no, in the locked version there are actually 3 birds instead of 1. Now we have to model 2 more. So just be mindful of that. That brings me to production order. The production order is actually different, or it should be different from shot or broadcast order. Production order is the order of, for example, episodes, or let's take just one episode as an example, which is made out of many shots. Production order of the shots doesn't need to start from shot 10, shot 10, 20, 30, 40, that's the production order. It could start right in the middle rather than from the first shot. The reason for that is that you're still testing stuff. When you're starting a new project, you are in the middle of episode 1. You want to start in the middle because that's a bit more forgiving, and making mistakes is not going to be seen or noticed as much as making mistakes or imperfections at the very beginning or at the very end. This is the same principle for which when you go to have your showreel review, people would say, put your best work at the beginning, and the work you're not very sure of right in the middle, or your next best work at the end. That's because the beginning and the end is what people will remember, or people will remember better. So when planning your production order, like what shots get put into production first, you can make sure that the one in the middle of the episode go first into production, and you can test those. And if some stuff breaks, or some stuff doesn't work as excellently as in other shots, that's going to be fine. And that brings me that shot order brings me to another important topic, which is testing the pipeline on a shot as early on in production as possible. You can test a shot or a sequence as early as you can, and that shot or sequence can usually be in the center of the episode rather than at the very beginning or at the end, where people will remember. That shot or sequence that you will test it will become the backbone or the blueprint for the entire episode or for the entire show even, once you have established a certain look or a certain style, both in animation, quality of animation. I'm talking about, quality of animation. I'm talking about quality of lighting, the rendering, the compositing, all these come together. And you want to make sure you test a shot from the very beginning of production to the end as early as possible. I can show you an example of the using the making of this short film I directed at Blue Zoo Animation called Lynx and Birds. So as soon as the birds character and the lynx character were defined, we went straight as soon as possible into modeling and texturing and grooming. That was really helpful to define the characters, but that was not enough. We needed to test the characters under the light. We needed to test the characters under the correct environment, in the correct environment, and under the light conditions. So we used the concept art for the environment, and we tried to get a sequence right in the middle of that short early on. This is the sequence you can see. It's been rendered, but not comped at all yet. So it's very crude, very elementary, grainy renders at this point, but that was rendered as soon as possible to test the depth of field, the amount of effects we wanted, where the lights were coming from. You want a rim light, you want a key light, how many lights, how many rim lights or fill lights do you need in the scene. And once you establish that and you are happy with that shot, which comes right from the middle of the short, then you can apply that setup to every other shot like this one. And that really helps. That really helps streamline the production. Once you're happy with one shot early on in production, then everything else goes much smoother. I do believe there is a missing step in production. If we look at this little drawing that I found from the internet, there is a missing step, I believe. Sometimes it's mentioned, sometimes it isn't. But for me, from a former animation perspective, is something very important. The missing step is the voice performance and the video reference, which most people believe comes here. Now, this is not about 3D, or it's not about 2D or stop motion. Like this could be applied to any technique. Most people think that video reference, so filming yourself doing the performance, or downloading references from the internet, or recording the voice of your character, that should come right before animation. Coming right before animation will be, efficient, because you can, give the animators that video right away and they can get to work. However, I believe it should come here. I think it's important to have that voice performance and that video reference as early on as possible. It's not always doable on productions, but if you can do it, I would suggest to have it basically when the animatic is a work in progress, during the animatic stage. Because a voice performance and a video reference, how you act, how you move, that informs not only the design, but also the modeling team, which informs the informs the rigging team, which informs then the animation. So if you are moving in a certain way, if you're a character which moves in a certain way, you will need a certain amount of topology in 3D. You will need a certain amount of details on the skin, and that detail can be used by the rigging to make the movement seem more realistic and more accurate. So it's not just about animation, voice performance, and video reference. It's also about informing what style of design and what style of and the amount of detail you need to put into modeling and rigging before it goes to animation. It will help you feel and define your character. That's just put into a nutshell. It informs the design, modeling, rigging, and animation teams. I can show you just an example of a progression from animatic all the way to final product with the voice performance in and with the animation reference, the reference.
Forget about the joy of giving. Forget about Christmas cheer. You will find the meaning of Christmas right here.
And that's the final render after lighting.
Forget about the joy of giving. Forget about Christmas cheer. You will find the meaning of Christmas right here.
Yeah, really helpful to have that little clip, not just to know how the character moves, but also how the character should be rigged and modeled. After looking at this progression, I just wanted to add a little animatic tip in there. When transitioning from an animatic to animation, please always assume that fully animated shots will take a bit more time than storyboarded ones. That's because with storyboards and with choppy images in the animatic, our brain is a bit more accepting. If the image is not that smooth, we can get away with quicker action. And maybe it's something will look good at animatic, but when you step into animation, it will feel too fast, way too fast. So if you watch your animatic and you have a feeling some shots are too fast at animatic stage, when you have just boards, they will definitely be too fast when you get the fully animated shot. So just be mindful that you might need to add a few frames here and there to allocate a better animation and more harmonious animation once you jump from animatic to animation. Or just you can foresee that and just add a few more frames right at the beginning of the production. So even if in animatic it looks a bit slow, it will look good at animation stage. These are just a few extra examples of the power of video referencing and how it can inform the team of the movement of the characters on the performance, but also the way it needs to be rigged, the way it needs to be designed sometimes. So this is from my previous Bad Dinosaur show for Netflix. So we needed to understand how a Quetzalcoatlus, like this giant flying dinosaur, was moving, and how a little T-Rex would dance. Voila, good times. And if you feel brave enough, sometimes you can even skip over animatic and storyboarding and just use your video reference or as a blueprint for your short. This happens very rarely, and in this case you will see now this is a personal project, so there was no client involved. So as I said, it could be a bit risky, but you can do it. You know, sometimes you don't need, if you have a static camera like in this shot, you can just film yourself and then base the performance on that. Voilà. Lots of Christmas content today, right? Fantastic. At the beginning of September. That's right on time. Right. And we are getting to the end of all these main points I wanted to make for production. This is point 8, and that's my favorite part of the animation pipeline. That's a secret spot that the most of production managers or producer are not aware of. It's my magical spot where I can be free like a bird, and it's right there. That's, I think, where magic happens. That's where filmmaking happens. It's basically at the very beginning of storyboards, and it's called thumbnailing, when you can be free as a bird. Why do I say that? I do love that because from that moment onwards, everything when you are involved in a commercial or you're involved in a TV series, everything from that moment gets stored and archived. Like everything needs to go through the system. It needs to be uploaded into the whether you're using ShotGrid or you're using just a Dropbox with a folder structure or you're using a server, that it doesn't matter. But from that moment, everything becomes official. Like all the products, all the art, all the edits, they get put into the system. But with thumbnailing, everything stays onto your desk. You can just plant things on paper in your little booklet. No one will need to see them except for you maybe and the storyboard artist or the editor or the story supervisor. It's something very private and very magical. And that's, I think, where ideas are born. The ideas are not born when the animatic is, when you watch a very nice and polished animatic like the ones I showed you before for my in my making of videos. That's not how ideas are born. Ideas are born with these crappy little doodles, you see. If you want to reach and you want to obtain the beautiful, sleek, furry rendered links, you need to endure those very crappy drawings, very simple sketches, and believe in them. Like you look at them and say, that can work, that can be in the final film. That's, I think, where the power of filmmakers come from, like believing in simple scribbles. If you want the very nicely rendered, fully, high-end CGI elves, you need to pass through thumbnails, like I still use pencil sometimes. You don't need to. You can do it on Photoshop, on Procreate. But I do like doing thumbnails still on pencil because that feels really personal. That feels really intimate. It's something that only I can see or a few other people, and it doesn't need to stay in the animation pipeline. It's out of pipe. All this to say, don't underestimate the power of thumbnailing before you get into official boarding. That's a very powerful tool to make your film look better. And last but not least, we live in a moment in which it's almost impossible to make a full production under the same roof. We always or almost always collaborate with other studios. There is sometimes production is split among 3 or 4 different studios in 3 or 4 different continents. So it's really important to be mindful of a accurate pipeline when you move from studio to studio, or when you are working with vendor studios, so which means outsourcing animation to other countries. So when that happens, whether you are working, from one branch of your studio to the other, or you're working with a satellite studio outsourcing, you have to be as instructional as possible when you are assigning or briefing tasks. For example, on Sun and Ground, we are working with a vendor in India. So they are making some of our animation there in India. And when that happens, when we need to brief and launch an episode, it's paramount that they have all the designs, all the scripts, the animatics with shot number, the video references that I've been shooting or recording myself or my colleagues, and all the director notes that are usually coming as written PDFs or JPEGs. In particular, the designs, it's important to have designs plus callouts. So if you're designing, for example, a car, you don't want to have just one design of the car. You need to have different perspectives. You need to have a reference of the materials for every part of that car, so that they know what kind of texture, what kind of materials to apply to the surface and to the different parts of that vehicle. All this is very important to be packaged clearly and be delivered in time for the team in the vendor studio to prepare themselves. if possible, I always like talking to the team directly or in the same room. If it's not possible, I would try to
I'm
make
really
sure
sorry,
that you jump on.
Simon. I'm really sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but we are running out of time, and maybe you can say some conclusions to our viewers, and then we'll have question sessions. Session.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
This was like the last point. So yeah, if you have, we can then open the Q&A if you prefer.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
I just wanted to say, yeah, it's like this is when working with someone abroad, it's important to package it all up and make sure everyone knows what to do. And I can skip over this one and we can just do some Q&A if you like.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Маєте якісь питання? Do you have any questions? Yeah.
Hello, I wanted to ask when the script is written and the concept art, is it like the first script is written and then the concept art is made, or are they made at the same time, or are they influenced by each other?
Yeah, that's very interesting. That's a very interesting question. And actually, it happens sometimes that it's a very organic. The pipeline can become very organic, and some of the ideas that the concept artist or the character designer does get inserted into the script. So it depends if you have time to develop. It depends how much time you have to think over the story and refine it. But it happened more than once to me that a certain design or a certain choice in the character or in the environment design has actually instructed the script writers, or has made the script writer change an idea in the story. So as a rule of thumb, I would say the story comes first, and once you have the story, you jump into design and character design, but it's not always the case. It can be the character can influence the story as well, the design.
Okay, thank you very much.
No problem. Let me stop this.
Hi, Simone. Thank you for sharing.
Hi.
It was a delight. I was about to ask about our era of animation that we're witnessing right now, that we're mixing a lot of mediums, a lot of styles, new textures as well, 3D and 2D. And I wanted to ask what challenges might the pipeline face when new styles come into play, like with works like Love, Death and Robots or Alberto Mielgo works, cases like this. Like how do we maybe possibly adjust the pipeline? What challenges do we face, and how? What do we do if we understand that we need a little bit different approach visually? Do we lay out the whole team, or what do we do in these cases? Thank you.
That's a very interesting point, actually. For my experience in the UK, in London, working with rather big studios, I can firmly say that the smaller the studio it is, the more independent the studio it is, the easier it is to mix tools and make mixed media. Because the pipeline in big studios, in studios which have over 500 people, I'm talking about, VNEG, ILM, these studios which are huge. It's a big machine, and it's always more difficult to update the pipeline. So the pipeline tends to be a little more mechanic, a little heavier to move. It doesn't react so quickly to new visual styles or new tools that can be injected into that. So I think the when you are an independent studio making a short film or a short content for a commercial, it's much easier to mix tools like lots of people mix Blender, use a bit of Maya, and then ZBrush, and then they might composite or render everything in Houdini. It's so much easier to do that because you're free from a system which has been used for years and years. When you're working for a bigger company, it's much more difficult to break out of that. So the main challenges, I think, is for big studios to become more flexible and accept tools which are not the industry standard or have not been the industry standard for the past 20 years, such as Maya and Nuke and all these other tools which almost every company or almost all the companies I've worked with have. The challenge is, can we get rid of that tool and use another one without breaking our pipeline? That's a big challenge. And if you can do that, then you can adapt to other visual style more quickly, I think.
Okay, thank you for your presentation and all of your tips. They're amazing. I want to ask you about the last thing from your presentation, how and where to find people to work on different stages of animation production. While you were answering other questions, I was thinking, I remember that on festivals, students was trying to find internship, and this is like one of the options, but maybe you can suggest another. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's a nice question. I love going to festivals. I love spending time with other filmmakers and also meeting younger filmmakers and see if there is potential to collaborate. So that's a film festival like the one you're attending now is definitely a plus. Depending on the country, I think almost every country, almost every big city has got some meetups, like animation meetups or creative meetups or meetups where you do live drawing or do art together. In London, we've got, for example, something called Drink and Draw. You go to a pub, you drink and you draw, and then you drink again, and you talk and conversation and get to know people. There are other events which are just for animators where we help giving feedback. I've been participating as a mentor for a few years. It's called SIGGRAPH London, Bring Your Own Animation. So I'm not saying like every city has got it or every country has got it, but most places I think have got certain artistic meetups, and those are very important, I think, for meeting new people and new talent which can become your colleagues one day. So I would definitely recommend going to those, not only to animation festival, but also to art or industry meetups. I think that's one of the biggest advice. And another advice I would say is it's not necessary sometimes to go to the biggest festivals in order to meet interesting people. Sometimes smaller, more niche festivals are actually more effective in getting to talk to people and getting to actually have a conversation, because the big festivals like I love Annecy, but has become so huge. It's sometimes difficult to have a conversation with someone you want to meet. It's really, really tough. Where else more niche, smaller gatherings are actually the key, I think, for having a genuine human interaction and actually discover if someone is good to be hired.
So, are there any questions?
Yeah, one small. That's the last one. So, Simon, thank you. I express a big gratitude for your presentation. And continuing the question before the previous one about the pipelines on big studios, from your experience, is it okay to adjust pipelines when you are already on stage of production, probably, if team found more sufficient way to do the job, or it would cause some troubles to have such an experience?
I think it's possible. I think it should be done. It's not ideal, and it can create some delays, but I think the time spent in readjusting the pipeline is then gained. It's like you win that time back in the long run, in the future. So if you are at pre-production or right at the beginning of production and you realize this way we are sharing folders or sharing files doesn't work, we need to rewrite it, I think it's better to do it sooner rather than later. If you get to the, to post-production, I would not bother changing the pipelines. Like we are very close to the end. Let's just keep going as we have. But if you are at the beginning of production or in pre-production and you realize we need to change something, I think it's still possible. Yeah, just be careful not to break too much stuff.
So, for example, if we do those adjustments, we will have to do again pipeline tests and go to the very beginning.
Yes, yeah. That's why I was mentioning having a one test shot or one test sequence, which you could do from beginning to end as soon as possible. Because if you change the pipeline, you will have to go back to the test shot and redo it from scratch and make sure that the test shot works out and comes out as nicely as it used to, or even better. So maybe you don't have to start the whole project from scratch, but if you do change an important step in the pipeline, then you'll have to redo a test, at least on a shot or a sequence. Make sure that you can go from animatic all the way to final products with that new pipeline.
Brief and clear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Simone. The presentation was great and it was full of interesting and important tips.
Thank you.
Дякуємо всім.
Thank you everyone that you came today to Linoleum. We invite you tomorrow to the screenings after 4 p.m. and the lectures after 5 p.m.
Ciao, ciao.